Are you guys ready? Are we good for this? Okay, so, hey, good morning, or afternoon, or noon. Good noon.
Well, no, it's still morning for about 30 seconds.
30 seconds, okay. So this is the Dark Side of the Doctor panel, and we are representatives of a group called the Tulsa Doctor Who Viewing Society. I'm going to go down the line here and have everybody introduce themselves, and I'll start with myself since I'm already talking. My name is Chris Burnham, and I run the Tulsa Doctor Who Viewing Society as it currently exists. We meet twice a month, mostly at the Hardesty Library, and show episodes of Doctor Who as well as other British science fiction shows. The group was created by a friend of mine named Bruce Rich, who wanted to encourage an awareness of British culture and British television, and so he put this thing together in 1999, and it's been going ever since then. And along the way, another friend of mine, who's supposed to be on this panel, we're not quite sure where he is, came up with the idea to do these type of panels so that, because we basically got tired of paying admission to get into cons like this. And so when we discovered that they would give us these lovely things if we just sat up and talked and sounded like we knew what we were talking about, we were like, cool, I'm totally glad to do this.
Spend all my money on the suit.
Yeah, so that's me, and now we'll move down the line here.
Hi everybody, my name is Tuck Davian. I'm usually known around the Sooner State as the guy in the bow tie. I am the ring announcer for many different wrestling promotions and mixed martial arts cage fighting organizations around the state. But I am also a huge nerd and I love Doctor Who. So when they decided to have me up here, because I also do several different Tennant cosplays, I do the voice sometimes if people ask me. And yeah, I said, hey, that sounds like a fun idea, so here I am.
I'm Brian Copeland. I do audio and video production. I failed with that tonight. If you saw me trying to set things up earlier, that did not work out. We're getting video though, so that's good. We'll use that later. But I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. I've seen all the Doctor Who episodes. That's why I'm here.
I'm Jill Horton. I got railroaded into doing this 6-7 years ago.
But it was a nice railroading. It was really polite.
Jill, please, 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 please.
We'll get you in for
please.
free. I guess.
I'm Bruce Williamson, and what they didn't mention is it was unfortunate being in a panel as an audience member and Chris having to chime in and correct the speakers. This way he's on the panel, and hopefully we're on the panel correcting him rather than it coming from the audience.
It does happen, it's true. I'm a little notorious for that. Okay, so quick survey amongst the people here. This is usually what Ogre does to start things off. Just to get a lay of the land for us to figure out where you're all coming from as far as fandom goes. How many of you started watching Doctor Who with the current series, like those series that started in 2005, the new series? Okay,
And a sea of hands goes
a
up.
sea of hands. Okay, that's kind of what we expected. How many of you, this is the weird one, how many of you actually came in with the 1996 Paul McGann TV movie that was shown on Fox? How many of you, that was your first exposure to Doctor Who? Anybody? Sort of, kind of. One person, good, one person. That's great. That came out on my birthday. It was the greatest birthday present I ever had. How many of you are old school Doctor Who fans? You grew up watching it on OATA or your local public television station back in the 80s and maybe even in the 70s if you're old enough for it. Okay, that's me. Brooks is my best friend. I met him in middle school. He's responsible for what I am. There's Ogre. Everybody say hello, Ogre.
The devil and the devil shall appear.
I'm sorry to have these words that I've heard of dollars around Gallifrey.
Ogre will not need a microphone, as you can already tell, as he is quite verbose and loud as it is. All right, so I've already done your job in terms of the survey to see where everybody lays here.
Okay. Where's everyone laying?
We're going to figure that out later tonight,
Okay.
but that's fine. Okay, so the reason we came up with this panel is because for most of us, I think it's probably true that we look at the Doctor, obviously, as this massive hero figure. No matter which of the ones that it is, they're a hero. They do the right thing ultimately. But
the Doctor can be a bastard flavored bastard.
The Doctor can be can have habits of perhaps not being the most upstanding individual at times. And sometimes it's for the greatest of intentions in the long game. But it still doesn't necessarily look good. And so we just kind of wanted to go through, because since we're on the verge of a new Doctor as of October 7th, in case you haven't heard, the official release date for the new series is October 7th. It will be simulcast around the world, so it's like 8 o'clock English time, which means like 1-ish over here, 1 or 2 o'clock.
We're 6 hours behind.
Yeah, okay. Then we got this new one that we don't know anything about except she's a woman, but personality-wise, we got nothing on her. So there probably are going to be some dark aspects of her, assuming that she's like all the others. So it really started in the beginning. If you've seen the original Doctor Who, like from the beginning, from An Unearthly Child and the Daleks and the Edge of Destruction.
In other words, the 50s.
Yeah, no,
60s.
63, but close.
50 years ago.
50 plus years ago. If you've seen that, if you watched especially those 3 stories, you know that the Doctor was not the friendliest of persons. If you've seen the original pilot, the pilot that was never transmitted, he's pretty harsh to his granddaughter. He calls her stupid. He's not a nice guy. And that softens over time, but that's a clear indication that even in the beginning, there's this unfriendly aspect to him. And then it buries itself for quite a while, until you get to the 4th Doctor. And we all know the 4th Doctor because Americans, this was what we thought of for a long time was the Doctor in the classic era. The hair, the hat, the long scarf, all the teeth, yeah, all that.
Or, if you're one of the new Doctor Who ones, and you saw the 50th anniversary special,
The Curator. Yeah.
And everyone's like, what's so special about him? It was him.
Yeah. He is a bright, shining example of this dichotomy between a good person who goes around and saves the universe and does the right things, and yet he has these moments where
he will destroy everything.
Yes. There's a season-long epic with the thing called the Key to Time, where the Doctor has to assemble the Key to Time for purposes that only these superior beings are really going to know. And at the end of that, he makes it quite clear that he now has the ultimate weapon in his possession, and he gives this great speech, and his eyes roll back in his head, and he looks, we all watching this, and we're like, oh my God, the Doctor's been totally corrupted by this. And then he tells Romana, no, I'm not really, but that's what I could do. I could do. So the possibility's there underneath him. And then there are other stories, 4th Doctor-wise, where these bits come out. Pyramids of Mars, he gives a talk about, beginning about, he's not human, and he walks in eternity, and humans are just kind of ephemeral to him out there. So the character trait is there.
And don't forget the arc in space, where he had to berate his companion to get her to do the response that he wanted to have her have.
Right. So the manipulation is there from the beginning, but it's buried. It's low. It's low key type of stuff.
I'd like to say one thing
Go
about
ahead.
the 4th Doctor. This is something we have to take into account. The 4th Doctor was sent on a mission by the Time Lords to commit genocide.
Right.
Think about this. They sent the Doctor to commit genocide, and he was okay with this.
Well,
yes, it was done.
he was okay with it at first. I mean, ultimately, when he gets to
Genesis of
the
the Daleks.
moment of actually blowing the Daleks up, he has the big moral quandary, and he wins out on the right side, which is what we expect the Doctor to do. But
the fact that he was okay with it
Yeah.
up until that very moment, he was like, we're going to rid the universe. Yes, he was admitting genocide, but he was admitting to, in his mind, up until the actual moment of doing it, genocide was potentially a good thing.
okay. So this is our hero.
And this is also where we get dialogues from. So.
Right. And so, but it's buried. It comes out here and there, and then we get to the 1980s, and then we get to the 6th Doctor, and then specifically we get to a character called the Valyard. How many of you know about the Valyard? Those of you, okay, so most of you do not. Okay, so Colin Baker's time on Doctor Who was very troubled as a whole, but his 2nd season was essentially a situation where they took what was really happening, and then Doctor Who was on trial, and they put it into the show. The Doctor was on trial. And in the course of that season, we discover that the prosecutor that he's facing,
The Valyard.
the Valyard, is an amalgamation of all the dark components of the Doctor's personality, somewhere between his 12th and final regenerations, is the way that it's phrased at the time.
Okay, we have to put one thing in context here. This was set in the 80s, where the Doctor still had plenty of time before his final incarnation. That is before we got to, we're now on actually regeneration.
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? We have a whole panel about that too. But
That's a whole different
officially,
Official regenerations, we're up to number 14, 15.
we ran through we ran through the full 13,
The full 13
and then Capaldi's number 1 on the news cycle,
is 14.
so 14. So yeah, Jody will be 15. Yeah.
So we're up to number 15. So somewhere between his 12th
Yeah.
and his final regeneration, or her final regeneration now, we got a lot of room here to work with, people.
Right. And there's a lot of dark stuff, especially as you guys who are new fans know, there's a lot of darkness in there. And it starts really appearing with Colin's Doctor because of this revelation of this particular character.
Chris, one other thing.
Mhm.
For everyone who's not familiar with classical, the Doctor we're referring to is the one with the loudest outfit ever. I mean, nice curly hair, but the outfit looks like Technicolor threw up on it.
Yeah.
So that way you can get just a visual idea of who we're talking about.
I still think he pissed off the wardrobe department.
Well, he wanted a whole black uniform, and he was told that wasn't practical. And hello, I'm sorry, I believe Christopher Eccleston made that happen. So then we go from Colin to Sylvester McCoy, who for the classic series is probably the darkest of all the Doctors, which is, again, a weird dichotomy because he's a goof. In the first season, he's like Charlie Chaplin, and he's physical comedy, and he's goofy, but starting with his second season, he becomes much darker. We find the Doctor have a lot of secrets. A lot of secrets. He's buried weapons from the Time Lords. He's manipulated stuff. We find in his third season that he's manipulated his companion's entire timeline and forced her to do things much like he did with Sarah Jane, with a Tuck reference, but on a much longer game, much more, to the point where Ace is outraged at him for what he did. And he knows what he's doing, and he thoroughly believes what he's doing is right in the end.
But with Sylvester McCoy's Doctor, we have to say, remember how I mentioned earlier, Tom Baker's Doctor, the 4th Doctor, had no problem with genocide up until the time it came to it. Sylvester McCoy's Doctor, basically loaded the gun, handed it to the Daleks, and dared them to shoot him. He gave them a Gallifreyan weapon that could destroy a planet. And he armed it, so instead of whatever they targeted, say Earth, it hit Skaro, home planet of the Daleks. He did this intentionally.
Yeah, he blew up an entire planet willingly.
But to keep his conscience clear, he didn't do it. Because he tried to warn Davros, aka the Emperor, not to do this. But he had it set up so, because he knew they wouldn't listen to them. To me, that's kind of dark.
It's very dark. It's very dark. And even the Doctor's costume that he wears in his third season reflects this change, because he's for the first 2 seasons he's got this kind of cream-colored jacket that he wears, and in the third season he switches it to a very dark brown. And the tone of everything becomes much more serious in general for him. And if he had had the 4th season that he wanted to have, and that Andrew Cartmel, who was the script editor at the time, wanted to have, we would have had a lot of massive revelations about the Doctor's past, about just how far back into Time Lord history he really does go. And some of those, if you were a fan in the 90s and all we had were these lovely novels that continue the story of the Doctor, a lot of that story was encapsulated in a book called Lung Barrel, which is nearly impossible to find now if you don't have a copy. But it describes a lot about Time Lord history and Time Lord biology and the Doctor's place in this whole society that he helped apparently create.
I believe that. Chris, I haven't read this book, so
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't the theory, according to this book at this time,
Yeah.
the Doctor was a contemporary of Rassilon
Yes.
and Omega?
Yes.
So, think about that. He was one of the founders of Time Lord Society, and he's the renegade.
Yeah. But the original Renegade. Yeah. So he's the Dark, but then the original series ends, and then we move into the '96 TV movie, in which we have a nice little, lovely little Doctor, Paul McGann. But even he, at the end, not the movie, but the end of his existence, turns to a dark side because there's a war coming. There's a big war on its way, and he knows that he's got to be capable of doing things that the Doctor shouldn't do. And so when he regenerates, there's some sort of subconscious decision made on his part to become a Doctor who is capable of doing things that the Doctor should not do, to the point where he even renounces the name of the Doctor and buries this incarnation later on in the back of his head.
Rest in
Not
peace,
one-
John Hurt.
Yes, he was great. My favorite thing of the new series is that John Hurt was the Doctor. The War Doctor is absolutely wonderful.
Totally agree with that.
And if you haven't heard any of the audio series
Yeah.
that John Hurt has done for Big Finish Audio, those are absolutely fantastic.
John Hurt was able to do 3 series of audios for Big Finish, and they totally flesh out this character that he created in the 50th anniversary special, and give a great indication of just how tortured this existence was for him to become this thing that he despises. But he has to do it for the ultimate good of the universe. And so then we come to the point where most of you entered to the series, which was Ninth Doctor Rose in the basement with the Autons, and Ninth Doctor blows open the door and says, run. Okay. So I picked up this book, and I don't know this individual personally, so this is not a plug by any means, but it's still a plug. I picked up this book in the dealer's room called Doctor Who Psychology, and within this book, as I skimmed through it for about an hour before this panel, one of the chapters ascribes a Briggs-Meyer personality test to each and every one of the Doctors, the first 12, except for the War Doctor. And also has an entire chapter on PTSD. Guess which Doctor that one gets a lot of coverage for? That would be number 9. And yet, he's not, well, except for these bursts of moments, especially when a Dalek is around, he's not all that dark of a Doctor, because he's suffering from all the effects of what he went through, and he's trying to bury that down. But man, think about that scene when he first comes face to face with the Dalek, in Dalek. He's terrified. And then, at the end of that show, he's picking up a massive weapon and going to blow it to smithereens.
Rose has to stop him.
And Rose has to calm him down.
Rose being the voice of reason. That scares me.
And then in the 2-part finale, where he just says, why don't you finish the job and just take yourselves all out? And I'm going to come and get you, Rose. I'm going to save you, and I'm going to blow all these Daleks to hell. That's not anything that you would have encountered with any previous Doctor. This Doctor is very, very key to wipe things out. And then we get, the Doctor that everybody, for the modern series, thinks is the Doctor.
Don't
Am I not skipping over?
Don't skip over the long game.
Go ahead.
The long game is very important when you're talking about the dark side of the Doctor. Who remembers the episode of on the satellite where they had to go to 4 or 500 and the kid got the thing put in his head?
This is one of your big
Just click. Okay. Well, see, the Doctor at the end of the episode realizes, hey, you're trying to capitalize on all this future knowledge and you're going to use it to make money. So you know what? The heck with you. I'm just going to leave it in your head. How do you like that? See ya! And we never hear anything about it again in the TV show. But in the Prisoners of Time comic book series, this comes back to bite him in the rear end in a big way, because Adam tends to be the bad guy in that series, and he goes around through time capturing all of the Doctor's previous companions and holding them hostage and threatening to do bodily harm to them and all that kind of thing. And the big reveal is at the end when he goes and then you realize, oh, it's Adam! So yeah, the Doctor is very cruel before we get to Tennant, who was, if you ask me, the cruelest of all
Go
of them.
ahead and lay it out, because I'll give you the floor on this one completely.
I know where you're going with this one. I want to post one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Yeah, because you posted where you want to go with this one. One of my favorite scenes, the first time we get to meet David Tennant's doctor. When he fights the
tracksuit.
yeah, or no, not the attraction.
Not the Sycorax, yeah, that's
I was
right.
going to say the attraction, that's a different doctor.
Yeah, that's the 11th.
Yeah. The doctor wins the fight. He's walking away. The Sycorax starts to pull a fast one. And the doctor, straight up, throws a banana, or throws an orange, kills him.
No second chances on that sort of mind.
And it looked for a while like that was not true. But ultimately, what we see from Tennant is that that really is true.
Oh no, Tennant is my favorite doctor, not because of the whole, oh, bingle, bongle, dingle, dangle, you can do, none of that.
He does really well, by the way.
That's great. I love all that. Tennant is my favorite doctor because of how cruel he is. He is, if you ask me of all, and this is putting him up against Peter, which is difficult because Peter was pretty angry all the time. He had the not resting angry face, just the angry face, pretty much all the time. No. Now, who remembers the Family of Blood? Okay, the Family of Blood. The two-parter where, if you don't remember it, he had to go back and mess with his brain so that he would be a human and pretty much hide. And the Family of Blood at the end of the episode says, well, you see, the doctor, he was being kind by trying to hide himself, but when we drug it out of him, what does he do? He imprisons the little girl in the mirror. He puts the dad at, was it the mom or the dad at the heart of the star? Yeah, and the brother has to be the scarecrow for life. And these are things that he's just going to say, okay, well, you know what, you messed with me, you crossed me, I don't like that, so...
Story, though. It is, it's a love story. I'm just saying, that particular one, beautiful love story. People in prison, it's still a love story. Dark side.
Well, one thing though about this particular story we're talking about, it was originally written as a Sylvester McCoy story.
Yes, it was a novel called Human Nature, which was the first title for the first part as well. But it's totally different. In the novel, the doctor still takes his personality and puts it into something that's not a foul launch, it's a croquet ball, or a cricket ball. And the whole aspect of the Family of Blood isn't actually in the novel. It's about, can the doctor survive as a human in World War I era or time? So the whole Family of Blood bit is added in for the television show specifically, and thus the dark components of the story are purely for Tennant and purely applied to Tennant's doctor as the story unfolds. And then with that, are you going to talk about the specials or the Waters of Mars?
Well, I was going to talk about the fires of Pompeii.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
The fire. Who remembers the fires of Pompeii? Anybody? Okay. Oh wow, that's really great. All right, cool. So everybody remembers that Donna essentially had to, with tears in her eyes, beg him to go back and save Caecilius because he was going to leave. Yeah, you know what? They're here. That's just the way it is. I could save them, but I don't want to do that. And she begged him, and then that ended up being a thing. Now, who remembers Peter Capaldi saying, "Who frowned me this face"? Anybody? Okay,
in
cool.
Deep Breath. Yeah.
Yes, deep breath, and that makes a reference back to the time. But if Donna essentially hadn't begged him, almost having to be on her hands and knees at that point, please go back and save them, he'd have been like, it is what it is. What are you gonna do?
And then he completely loses it. In my eyes, he completely loses it in the Waters of Mars, because he fully embraces this idea that he is the last of the Time Lords, and that essentially there is nobody who can stop him from doing anything. And he's told when he first meets Donna in not the Christmas Invasion, but the
Runaway Bride.
In the Runaway Bride, when he first meets her, she says, "You need somebody. You need somebody to stop you." And she's right, because he doesn't have anybody then. And he goes bonkers, saying, "I'm just going to rewrite time, and I'm going to save these people, and
I'm the last Time Lord.
I didn't nobody who's going to do anything." And time itself basically does stuff, and flips the switch in his head, and he's like, I can't believe that even with all my abilities, I should have all this superior power. And I mean, he's really like tipping over the scales to me at that point. Yeah, and until the point where he firmly has to sacrifice everything in the next story. in
That,
part,
that gal
every
even
time.
says no one should have that type of power,
Right.
and to his response is just tough.
Yeah, yeah. So he is for as pleasant and happy and acceptable and easily relatable as he is as a doctor to so much of fandom, because he was in my opinion, what made the show so popular in this run. He is definitely a very dark character and a very dark doctor when you dig inside of him with these samples.
Everyone keeps treating Ten like he's this fluffy puppy of a Time Lord, and then he'll turn around and go, okay, I'm destroying everything.
And then we get another fluffy, puffy companion, or doctor in terms of Matt Smith, for the most part.
The uncoordinated house cat.
But
goes along your shelf, combs his helmet. Oh, there's your face.
Well, he's the puppy dog that constantly pees on your carpet, but he's just so gosh darn adorable that you just can't bring yourself to fault him for it.
does that sound familiar to you, Ogre? You do. But even 11 has the moments. For instance, the episode Amy's Choice. You remember Amy's Choice? Okay, with the Dream Lord. Great episode, horrible title. I hate the title of it, but I love the story itself. So you get the Dream Lord, which those of us who are classic Who fans watched this story for the first half of it and went, is this the Valyard? Is this going to be the Valyard again? Because the Dream Lord, everything he's doing seems to be character-wise consistent with being the Valyard. But no, it's the Dream Lord, but he still represents a physical manifestation, sort of the darker aspects of the Doctor. And so here we go once again with him having to face all these things that are buried deep inside him. And we even get, like, at the end of that story, these kind of side-eye glances from Amy and Rory about, we thought we knew this guy, and now we saw this other thing. Is this really what he's all about?
And the Doctor says it himself. No one hates me as much as I do.
Right.
Because he knows what he's done.
You know, yeah.
He knows what he's
even
capable
though
of.
even though he doesn't, and that's one of the things that they addressed in this book as well, is the fact that of all the doctors who repeatedly say, I'm not trying to remember what I did in the war, during his time seems to be the most common flashback. Even though we don't get true flashbacks, we get the most references to the Time War and to what he's done since the very first stages with Eccleston.
I'd like to say, okay, guys, they're talking about this aspect of Matt Smith's Doctor. I'm going to go a little further back. I'm going to go to the beast below.
Okay.
The Doctor was ready to kill the last of its kind.
Right.
The turtle, right?
Yeah.
It was a whale.
Space whales.
Space whale.
You're thinking Terry Pratchett.
There's no 4 elephants on the back of it. But the Doctor was willing to kill this creature because he was so mad at the humans that were riding it. Amy is the one who talked him into saving him.
Again, this theme that runs through so much of the new series of the Doctor is an uncontrollable force that needs a companion to keep him in check and keep him calmed down. Otherwise, he gets out of control.
And then the other one that really brings to mind is how damaged and violent the Doctor can be. Is immediately after that.
In the Victory of the Dogs.
Victory of the Daleks.
Yeah.
When the Doctor has had enough from being asked if he wants tea by a Dalek,
Which is such a silly concept to begin with.
he grabs a pipe and starts beating
whacking, yeah.
the Dalek to make it tell him the truth.
Yeah.
He is physically trying to torture a living being, even though it's in a tank, a living being in a tank, to admit to something because he knows it's true. Whether the creature is willing to admit it or not. I mean, yes, we find out that it was a plot to get him to do this, but for reverse psychology being used on the Doctor for once.
Even the Daleks told him you would make a good Dalek.
Yeah, on multiple occasions, the Daleks have said that the Doctor would be a great Dalek.
My favorite Dalek is Rusty for that reason. You would make an excellent Dalek.
The episode Nightmare in Silver, where we get the Cybermen, but most importantly we get Mr. Clever, is another great example in my mind of just how dark the Doctor can be. Because again, it's this emergence of a lot of buried components to his personality that are now allowed to come out. We really get the impression through Matt's series, I think, that the Doctor is having to constantly work to repress and to hold down inside himself a lot of these qualities that he let slip through with David. And I think a lot of it is the idea in his mind that I can't afford to slip up like that again. I came so close to ruining everything. And I acknowledge that this is part of me, but I've got to keep it inside. I've got to keep it inside. And so when Mr. Clever manifests itself, then it's all of that interior, dark, evil aspects given reign once again to go out and do as will, even though it's not like he chose that. It's the Cyberman manipulation making it happen. Still, those are actual, inside characteristics of the Doctor as a whole.
Okay, one of my favorite things is not the grand scale, I'm going to wipe out an entire species because I think they're evil level of darkness in the Doctor. It's the intimate darkness, where he will rip the soul out of his companions to accomplish a goal.
Right, which we saw in the classic series a lot, but yeah, he'll do it. He'll do it.
He absolutely used Clara in the Rings of Akhaten.
Yes.
Who remembers the Rings of Akhaten? Okay, cool. Who remembers the Bells of St. John? Cool. At the end of the Bells of St. John, after all of that, the Doctor goes back into Clara's past, and he goes to her mother's funeral and sees the whole leaf on the wind, and wait, this isn't a Firefly panel. And all of that stuff, and then during the Rings of Akhaten, when she has to buy the speeder bike, essentially with her mother's ring, because they only take things of intense personal value, the Doctor hasn't told Clara he's gone back in time yet. She doesn't know that. And he's, oh yeah, sure, yeah, you can pay with that thing. I know what that is, go ahead. So she does it, which allows her to, they can race off and say the whole thing, but he knew what was going on with that item, and he had no intention of telling her at all. She had to drag that out of him at the end of that episode. Oh, no, wait, I remember seeing you at my mother's funeral, and he's like, yeah, I was kind of there, wasn't I? And so yeah, he's absolutely used his companions in the past to whatever end he wants to. And Jill, you're right, it's a very intimate darkness. I'm using you, but
I'm bringing you in, and I'm getting you to trust me, but you're still just a pawn in the game that I'm playing. That's a very Seventh Doctor idea right there. Chess, if you watch the Seventh Doctor series, chess is a big deal for the Seventh Doctor, and you can trace it back into some of the previous ones as well. But manipulation of chess, especially with pawns, is a repeated theme in Seventh Doctor story, culminating in one called The Curse of Fenric. That's still that whole idea of utilizing other people, be they companions or be they just people he encounters along the way, as pawns in this big game that he knows he's playing, and that everybody else is kind of ignorant of, or they might just get a tiny glimpse of it. That's a major characteristic of the Doctor. That's a dark, dark thing.
We can even trace that to an aspect of the first Doctor real quick. Sorry.
What did I miss?
Nothing.
Nothing important. Go ahead.
Are you capable of speaking without flapping your hands about?
No, it's not.
I admit this, but what I was going to say was, real simply, the 5 Doctors, the 25th anniversary special,
20th.
or 20th,
Yeah.
we get the original Doctor with a new actor facing a chessboard and having to get across it safely.
Yeah.
And rather in him using it to kill off its booby trap,
Yes.
he uses it to kill off an entire squad of Cybermen. Also, 4th Doctor, we had a giant cactus version of it.
Right, Megaloss. Yeah.
So I mean, going back, we see these different aspects of him, and we never, it's always, could he, but he doesn't. Could he
For
doesn't.
such a long time, right? And then finally, when we get up to Tenet, he's, what would it really be like if he did? And we see, almost.
It stops being
Almost.
could he, but he doesn't, and becomes could he, oh he did.
How far will he? how far, the question changes, I think, to how far really? And that's where the worry goes. And then, Capaldi. I was told recently, I was given this theory, that the reason that Capaldi is so angry his first season is because he knows he should. No, seriously. No. So is Sylvester, he wasn't angry.
Yes, but this time
and so is David. So is David Tennant, he wasn't angry either. No, the reason that Capaldi was so angry his first season is because he knows he shouldn't be there. That he's now been allowed to go beyond the normality of a Time Lord lifespan. And this is very new territory. Not completely unbroached, because the Time Lords mention in the Five Doctors that it can be done. But the assumption there is that it very rarely ever happens. And so in many ways he's encroaching in new territory, and he's scared. I mean, he's obviously scared. That part roots through very clearly, especially in the telephone conversation between 12 and 11. But the fact that he subconsciously understands that he really probably shouldn't still be around.
Put it this way. How many other Time Lords and Gallifreyans did he see burn through 12 generations and die?
Some right in front of him, yeah.
And then he's not only gone through his 13, he's now beyond that.
Yeah.
And that adds kind of a different level of PTSD to him.
Yeah, and again, PTSD, psychology. So Capaldi's dark at the beginning, and he makes no secret of it. He says, "I'm not a hugger. I'm not a carer. This is Clara. She cares for me because I don't want to. I'm going to be an unfriendly individual." And I never liked that character choice, because it was similar to Colin's character choice. I mean, one of the things we skipped, with Colin Baker, is that in his very first episode, he tries to kill his companion. Literally choke her to death. On purpose.
Hold on. That's justifiable homicide.
No, that's Perry. It's not. She has a couple of good things about her.
We didn't know that at the
Her
time.
legs and her tits don't count.
Well, I wasn't including her legs. So, see, but the Doctor literally tries to just choke Perry to death. The Capaldi figuratively tries to choke Clara to death here by encroaching on her life, intruding on her life and breaking up her relationship and doing everything he can to make himself as inconvenient as possible, because he knows that he shouldn't be here.
But he did that with Bill too. When he brought
was
the
different.
Pope into her apartment right when she was having that.
Yeah.
Not the Pope.
Yeah, I remember that. But it reads to me sort of different, because their relationship is so much. I didn't find Clara as acceptable as a whole as I did Bill. I loved Bill.
Oh, I love him.
Clara, I was like, once the mystery was solved with Clara, I really just lost a lot of interest in her, and felt that she was extremely. Bill was great, because Bill was like the most perfect representation of what a companion was supposed to be. The companions were supposed to be us. And Bill was awesome because she wasn't a clueless us. She asked, "What is it, Doctor?" But she found different ways to ask it, where it wasn't like she didn't have a brain. Like so many of the other companions, like, "Oh, what's this shiny thing that's coming to me, zapping me? What is it, Doctor?" "It's a Dalek." "Oh, is it dangerous?" Bill was like, "What's a Dalek?" Oh, that's scary. Let's get out of here.
But,
and, it was great.
Capaldi did have this moment. To me, one shiny moment of where he could have gone over to the dark side. He was given power over an army. An army of cybermen.
Right.
And he had it. I mean, he was seriously thinking about it for a second. And then he turned the army over to itself.
Yeah,
But
this darkness stuff is really a surprise. His best friend is with Missy and the Master.
Capaldi more so than others. I mean, the Fifth Doctor and the Master seem to have some sort of an interesting relationship that a lot of people in the 80s like to slash fit together. And the Third Doctor and the Master are definitely very close in many regards. Frenemies, yeah, that's good. But yeah, 12 and Missy is a unique pairing up there, but in the whole time, maybe more unlike with the Third and the Fifth, the 12 is trying to rehabilitate her. The 12 truly believes somewhere in there that Missy can be saved. And that goes back, I think, to 10, trying to save the Master because he's the only other Time Lord at the time that that he believed was in existence, and he didn't want to carry the burden of being the last one on his shoulders, even if the only other one is a despicable, horrible, murdering person. He's still another Time Lord, and therefore there's still somebody that can share the experience of what it's like to be a Time Lord out there.
Doesn't that make the saving kind of a selfish act?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And thus dark.
Also, none of the other doctors had to worry about a version of the Master trying to snarl them.
Well, and again, I would say there's some fiction out there that suggests that the Fifth Doctor...
Canon!
Okay, all right.
Fire the cannon.
different. Okay, so we've got either 5 or 10 minutes, depending on when they come in, to kick us out. And I think I'd like to hear some questions or some commentary from the audience at this particular time. So,
What was y'all's favorite dark moment?
Yeah, any favorite dark moments? Anything that we've missed that you're like, oh, what about this? Or any supposition about ideas of how Jodie is going to be potentially dark as well.
Or is there any version of the Doctor do you think was truly an innocent?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, is there any Doctor that doesn't exhibit any of this?
I have one that I can potentially try and throw out there.
Okay.
Peter
Davison, not dark. Okay.
the Fifth Doctor. I think out of all the versions of the Doctor, he is the least dark. I'm not saying he wasn't.
No, I'm thinking here. I'm trying to find if there's an example that I can easily bring up. He allows the Great Fire of London to happen.
Fixed point history.
True. Okay.
That's such an excuse.
Hey,
I hate that
it
excuse.
is kind of a lazy method of writing in there.
no, they use it in the series, so
I would say you're probably right until the case of Androzani. And in the case of Androzani, a much more, because Peter always played the Doctor who got it wrong, which is why he's my favorite. He's not perfect. He gets things wrong a lot, and so he's more human than others. But in the case of Androzani, where he's desperately trying to save Perry's life, and he becomes almost as close to a war doctor in that story as you're going to get probably in the classic series, then those darker edges kind of start to come out. But I think he and Paul, because Paul is described, if you're trying to one word describe the Doctor, any of the Doctors, Paul is typically referred to as the innocent until the end, where he recognizes the need for the darker sides in his next life.
That's 2 words.
But the doesn't count.
Yes, it does.
No.
okay. We still have 2 other Doctors we haven't discussed about the dark side. We've got the Cosmic Hobo.
Troughton, right. That's the way the Doctor described himself. I mean, the first Doctor calls him that.
And then we have
The Dandy.
James Time Lord.
Yeah, James Bond.
Which is John Pertwee.
Right.
And just on a side note, if you haven't ever done it, how many here watch Gotham? How many here have ever seen Alfred Pennyworth on Gotham? That is the son of the Doctor. That is John Pertwee's son.
And there are pictures of him in his father's costume, and he looks very much like his father in those costumes. And he actually has said he would love to play the role. He'd love to play, specifically he'd like to play his father's version in like some audios or on TV, either one. But he'd like to do that, and he looks so much like John that I think it would be perfectly fine for that to happen. I think that for them, the one that jumps to mind for Pat is probably the War Games, and it's not so much a dark aspect, it's the revelation of exactly what it is he's done, why he's running around the universe, how he really is a renegade, and he's trying to break away from what he feels is a crushing, boring existence of Time Lord society. But John's Doctor is he's the one that's not the outsider. John's Doctor buys into human society. All the other Doctors work outside and say, I fight the establishment. I don't like the military. I don't like the government. Blah blah. the third doctor has actually stated that he's part of these gentlemen's clubs and that he goes and hangs out with upper crust British society peoples, all again probably for the purpose of trying to gather information and utilize it to do whatever he needs to do. But he buys into society. Is that a dark aspect?
Is that why he drives that bright yellow car around?
He doesn't.
Leave Bessie alone.
He likes old cars. He says that at the end of Spearhead from Space, that he loved the car and he wanted one of his own, and then he gets Bessie from somewhere. You know. Okay, so again, we've got like 5 minutes now. Any questions? Any commentary? No, it's going to be super quiet.
If not, I'm going to throw out another version of the Doctor that is, it's not canon anymore, but it was at one point. Scream of the Shock.
Okay, so the other Ninth Doctor, right? The animated Doctor. Okay, so in 2000, if you're not familiar with this, in 2003, for the 40th anniversary, when it was considered unlikely that Doctor Who would ever return to the airwaves, BBC did an animated version of Doctor Who. They got Richard E. Grant in to voice the Doctor. The Doctor looks very much like Richard E. Grant looked like in The Little Vampire. He looks like the Doctor in Dracula had a child, and here's the Doctor. He has a female companion, the first African-American female companion in Doctor Who up to that point, and he has a robotic version of the Master as a companion, voiced by Yana. Come on, guys, help me out.
I haven't seen this.
No. Yana from Utopia. Before he regenerates into Johnson, he was the old guy.
Oh, I know who you're talking about, but his name I could.
Yeah, he's big, classic. Derek Jackson, thank you. Derek Jackson. And this was 6 parts, like 15 minutes each, and you can find it online. Actually, it's been released on DVD as well. This Doctor is very dark. He's like creepy dark. He's like, you know, the Doctor is a horror icon dark, yeah, and weird in that respect. So yeah, that's a darker aspect of stuff within the story, within the character himself.
If you guys don't start answering questions, I'm going to start doing my count of doctors, and that number gets exponentially larger.
That's a totally different.
Oh God.
Yeah, different panel. Totally different panel. Okay.
That's a 2-hour panel.
Yes.
Oh,
yes. Hey.
Hello.
So given at the point that his or her life the Doctor is on now,
Yes.
this time war kind of being resolved in the 50th, and Daleks, I think they said the Daleks aren't going to be in this.
None of the classic monsters are going to be in this new series, from what I understand.
But also remember the Doctor live.
That's true. Do you think that Jodie could potentially be one of the most lighthearted Doctors or least dark Doctors?
I just don't know. Potentially, the answer is yes. Honestly, I hope she's not just pure light and happiness and fluffy. Given what little we have seen from her in the previews, it's hard to get a grasp on her. I can tell that when they leaked, when the little like 23 seconds footage of her was released and leaked all those months ago, the only thing that I could grasp from that is that she's going to be the Doctor. And that was one of my key concerns about her was, can you take her lines and can I hear other Doctors saying them? And I absolutely could with what she was given in that little bit that was leaked out there. So I'm not worried about her playing the Doctor. But that aspect of her is one of the great unknowns that we have because they've been so... BBC is so... What? Information? No, thou shalt not. And it drives me back trying to get... Because I don't understand why they're so secretive about it. So,
before we wrap up,
yeah.
I do have one challenge for Jodie as the Doctor.
Okay.
I want her to do like every other living Doctor actor has done. I want to hear the damn Stonehenge speak.
I'm sure that when she gets on the convention circuit, that she will definitely be asked to do that, and that's a great test of her.
I think we're all really looking forward to seeing her take on the oncoming storm.
Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our time is up now. I want to thank you all for attending. On behalf of myself,
I'm Chris Burnham again. I'll be around the whole day.
Brian Copeland,
Jill Horton.
our missing compatriot Jay.
If we see him, we'll point him out to you. Yeah.
And tell you to throw something at him.
Yeah, he'll get car trouble.
And I have to say this, and memory of our friend Bruce.
Yeah, we've established this whole thing to begin with.
Thank you, and good day. Enjoy Wizard World. Come back and see some of us. Have 2 more people today.
Yeah, later on tonight at 6:30, Ogre and I and Jill, are you on the kaiju one as well?
She is now.
She is now. We'll be doing
That's how you
another.
get booked.
Bill, we have a job for you. You're going to be helping try and keep up with Crystal and Kaiju.
We'll be doing a kaiju panel, and then Ogre, you also have a Star Wars panel at 5:30.
I'm on kaiju because I'm the one with the laptop.
Yeah, that's what you drafted.
And we'll be around various places for the weekend, so if you want to come up and talk, we don't bite unless you pay us extra.